The average student spends more than 2,100 days in school during their childhood. That's almost 6 years of continuous schooling with no vacations, weekends, or holidays. You might assume that a student would accumulate an incredible amount of knowledge during that time, and that is partially true. Kids learn to read, write, and do a little math. They learn foreign languages and social skills. Later, they learn history, politics, and science. They develop their athletic and musical skills as well along the way. However, students could use these 2,100 days of school career much more effectively. There are a few reasons why a large part of the learning time at school is actually kind of useless. Even though students take away a lot from their time in school, there's still a lot more that could be done. So without further ado, let's check out 6 critical reasons why you don't really learn as much as you could at school. So for all this and more, stay tuned right here at Wonderlane. What was your elementary high school experience like? Be sure to let us know in the comments. At number 6 on our list, we've got the good old grading system. The grading system is supposed to make it easier to compare student performance and thus know directly how much a student has learned. However, the grading system also has some undesirable side effects. The grading system brings performance pressure into everyday school life. This means that children no longer learn for the sake of learning, but their primary concern is now good grades. As a result, the focus is on school performance rather than on the actual content. This in turn means that many students lose the fun of learning simply because of the grades. Everyone knows that without fun, one simply learns much more slowly and much less. Let's move on to number 5, which relates primarily to grades 6 through 12, the age in which students are most often going through puberty. During puberty, as we all know, the body changes in drastic ways. Hair grows in new places, sexual characteristics form, boys' voices break, and teenagers suddenly have very different interests. Another side effect of puberty is that adolescents become tired later. This is because the sleep hormone melatonin is released during puberty. Instead of being asleep at 9 or 10, most students are not asleep until 11 or 12. Accordingly, they are not as awake in the morning, and unfortunately, in many cases, this means that young people are hardly receptive to information in the first few hours of the day. They can do very little about this. It's simply biological. So if the school system were to take the biology of the students into account, one appropriate measure would be to have the school day start a little later, perhaps at 9:30 instead of at 8. At number 4, we've got something that could be best described as a social distraction. For many students, there is hardly anything more interesting at school than their classmates. It doesn't matter whether they're their best friend, their rivals, or their new crush. In the end, all of them are an enormous distraction to each other from the learning content. Especially during adolescence, this takes on an even more extreme form, because this is when many students start to use class time mainly for their own little games, and moreover, this is when people of the opposite sex, or even of the same sex, become much more interesting. The only solution to eliminate this social distraction would probably be individual lessons, but of course that's not really feasible, and it's not useful or productive towards a student's social development, which is a big part of going to school. At number 3, we've got the impact that students have on teachers. Ideally, a teacher has a certain authority. Students listen to him or her, and in the best case, even look up to their teacher. Ideally, a student would see his teacher like a role model. In reality, however, this is rarely the case. There exists a phenomenon that causes a lot of problems for teachers. Students care much more about what their classmates think about them than what their teachers think about them. Let's take an example to illustrate this. When Max messes up in class, his teacher, Mr. Smith, sends him out into the hall. Mr. Smith wants to punish Max by sending him into the hall, but for Max this is not a punishment at all. Because of Mr. Smith's reaction, Max has the attention of the entire class, and possibly even looks kinda cool. For him, Mr. Smith's action is therefore kind of more of a reward than a punishment. It's much more important to Max what his fellow students think than what his teacher thinks. Many teachers hardly have the power to change anything about their students' behavior, and of course this also leads to students taking much less away from school. Number 2, we've got something that I'm sure all of us can relate to, namely under and over demand. Since students are not taught individually but always in classes, under and overloaded classes naturally occur. After all, not everyone learns at the same speed. Some kids grasp the material immediately and then get bored and start to screw around, while others have not been able to keep up for a long time and become increasingly frustrated. The problem here is that students are individuals. Everyone understands things at their own pace. Classes, however, are not individualized at all. Each student is expected to follow the pace of the class. One solution to tackle this problem would be to offer individualized support and free work. This would allow everyone to learn at their exact and preferred pace and difficulty. No student would be left behind or miles ahead of the others. Last but not least, we come to the number 1 reason why students don't get as much as they could out of school. This reason is related to the curriculum. In school, the content that students deal with is precisely defined. There are exact curricula with very specific requirements. This means that students do not learn what they are interested in, but what they are told to learn. The motivation of these students suffers most from this. Instead of learning out of enthusiasm, they now learn out of obligation. It would be much better for their learning success if they learned out of their own interest and if they learned things that correspond to their own talents. This has been proven by numerous studies, and one way to put this into practice would be free work, which is used in so-called Montessori schools. In Montessori schools, the idea is that children can choose the materials they want to work on from a certain range of learning materials. This means that they can pursue their own interests, and after each week, they have to write down in a learning booklet what they have learned, so that one can be sure that the students are learning something and not just sitting in the corner twiddling their thumbs. And that's going to do it for this video on a couple of reasons why our educational system is a bit antiquated and why students don't take as much out of school as they probably could. Did we miss anything? What was school like for you? Let us know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to Wonderlane for new videos just like this every day or so.